Hey everyone, it's Brandon and our good friend Dave, and this is Locked On Twins. We are so excited for today's episode. Can't you see that we're excited? Well, probably not if you're listening, I guess. But
I'm
we're
excited.
we're going to talk to you about the ramifications of the Shohei Ohtani signing because it got a little weird. And then I have a Joe Mauer email for everyone to just digest and enjoy. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello again, and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren, and you can unfollow me on Twitter at Brandon_WARNE. And across the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, or across your radio dial, if you're listening in your car, is answer Dave Brown. Dave, how are we doing tonight?
We're doing great, Brandon. We're not doing as good as Shohei Ohtani's accountant, but we're doing pretty good.
Well, it's going to get tricky. It's going to be a lot of fun, and there's going to be a Shohei Ohtani day akin to Bobby Bonilla, I think. But we'll see how that all shakes out. Thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube. And as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we're your team every day. Again, like to encourage you to be active in the comments. We like to hear from you on YouTube. We like the thumbs up, whether it's the emoji or the actual act of clicking thumbs up on YouTube. But while you're there, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts, whatever podcast platform you're listening on. If there's a place to subscribe and or review, we'd love to hear from you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Dave, I feel like as much as Shohei Ohtani doesn't have that much to do with the Twins, I still kind of feel like we should start with what in the world is going on with this guy. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, well, I think every baseball fan's going to react to this, and I think a lot of them are going to go, "Well, hey, that's something that my team would never do. It hasn't done, and couldn't afford to do." I don't know if that's true, but I think that's what people are going to think. That
yeah. Well, so Fabian Ardaya of The Athletic, friend of the program. I don't know if he's friend of the program, but I like Fabian. He's a good dude. He's great at what he does. Says that Ohtani will defer $68 million annually over the course of his 10-year contract with the Dodgers. So it wasn't surprising that they would get unique with it. Jeff Passan, actual friend of the show, I should say. I think Jeff likes the show. Says that the competitive balance tax is about $46 million. John Becker, who also friend of the show, broke it down.
How many friends do you have?
I don't mean to brag, but at least 2 or 3. But he did some math to kind of regress what the financial value is.
I'm glad somebody did it.
Yeah, in terms of practical AAV, because with deferred money and everything, $70 million in the future is going to look a lot different. So I think it came out to like 40-something.
46.
Yep, 46, something like that. And then you have, how it affects the CBT. It feels like there's a dueling dichotomy here. They wanted to change the game in a lot of ways. 700, nobody thought 700 was even going to be a whisper of possible. And he'll get his money, but it'll still be at an AAV that's at least a little more, a perceived AAV that's a little more
what we thought it would be.
But with that said, I'm trying to make heads or tails of it, and I really can't right now.
Well, from the Dodgers standpoint, it's going to cost, we gave the number, the estimates that I've read, this is other people's math, $46 million to the CBT, so the competitive balance tax. So that's what it's going to cost the Dodgers on that ledger. Ohtani's going to take, I thought at first, I'm like, oh, he's deferring $68 million, 10% of the salary, or 9% or whatever. No, it's $68 million a year. It's crazy amount that he's going to get sometime He's going to make $2 million a year for the next. I don't have that in front of me, but 10 years or something, and then the rest of the contract's going to be like $68 million a year for 2043 or 44. So you mentioned Bobby Bonilla earlier, so it's going to take a while. And the thing about it, I always like to explain it like this: the money in the future, because of interest payments, and when you defer that much money, it's not worth as much in the future. Just think about what you could buy for $20 20 years ago. You can't really do that anymore. So $20 is worth less than it used to be
anymore.
So it was $700 million. What was that, Brandon?
I don't think they even sell Walkmans anymore. So I mean, your point is, it's a dual point. You can't buy something that cost $20 back then now, and it probably doesn't exist. So I mean,
right, unless you go resale shopping like some of us, but in the bargain bin. But so that's basically it. That money, today's $20 is tomorrow's 5 or 10. Yep. So I think I did that right. Maybe that's backwards, but money is worth less in the future. So that's what it means to the Dodgers to get a break on it in that way. And it's a $46 million. It's not a cap hit. That's a phrase we use in basketball, but it's a competitive balance cap. Ohtani's he's very practical about this whole thing. It was his idea, reportedly, to do this. He's making, well, we'll see how much he makes. He made reportedly about $20 million a year from off the field stuff with the Angels. And, you can't find the Angels anywhere really. So you can find the Dodgers pretty easily. We'll see that probably double. So he's not going to be hurting for money. The Dodgers cap hit, the competitive balance hit is not too bad. They'll be able to, that's another thing. It's not like the Dodgers couldn't have gone out and spent money anyway, even if Ohtani was actually making $70 million a year. These guys are billionaires that own the team. They have lots and lots of money. But it will give them, it will make them feel better about the additional money that they spend on the team in the near future. So it kind of works out for everybody, except fans of the Twins or whomever you want to insert into that equation.
When you look at what the Dodgers need, and again, I know we're not locked on Dodgers, we're not locked on Angels, we're not locked on Shohei Ohtani. If that show existed, I think it'd probably be Ben Verlander. But
maybe we should do it so he doesn't.
Yeah, I think he's got enough on his plate right now. This has got to give them a leg up on Yamamoto, doesn't it? And I don't mean like necessarily that they're friends or anything like that, or that one presence helps necessitate the other or whatever. But just from a financial standpoint, the fact now that they desperately need pitching because Kershaw's left arm is borked. We don't know what Urias has coming down the pipeline, and honestly don't care. They need a lot of help in the pitching side of things. They've got to be in the pole position, don't you think, for Yamamoto at this point?
I love pole position as a video game. It was one of my favorite Atari games, and it's a really apt metaphor here. And they, as good as the Dodgers are, Ohtani is not going to pitch this year. We saw what happened to the Dodgers last year in a lot of ways because of their pitching that kind of disintegrated. You could even sort of see it coming.
Yeah.
They're in a good position. They have been sort of building for this off season for years. Not, people would complain, hey, why aren't the Dodgers spending an excess amount of money this off season? Well, they're getting in position to do something like this.
Yeah.
Waiting for Ohtani, and Yoshinobu is probably a good bet to come over and make $300 million or whatever. We'll see what he defers, but they need a guy like that definitely in the rotation. Ohtani isn't going to pitch. The funny thing is about they probably aren't. Maybe Ohtani makes them favorites, but they still have holes amazingly in this lineup. So money doesn't buy what it used to on a baseball roster either. So they need somebody like that, a big time free agent, and they need him to be really good. The new guy from Japan. So it sets up nicely for them to get him, and they kind of needed to get him to make this team a winner, which is what Ohtani wants.
And it wouldn't be entirely unreasonable for the final financials to be $1 billion combined between the two players. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, for people who can't see, I'll narrate this as Dave Brown just did.
I was doing the Dr. Evil pinky.
Yeah. So I do want to come back to this. I did tweet as a joke that the Dodgers signing Ohtani confirms that they'll be eliminated in the playoffs by the 84 and 78 Cincinnati Reds. So
baseball humor is the funniest kind of humor.
Well, because you can't fake it and you can't make it up because it's too absurd. Let's do this. Let's take a quick second, talk about our friends at FanDuel. When we come back, I want to ask you a couple different things about this contract. I want to ask you about a few different things. Some relievers landing in the AL Central, which could be pertinent to what the Twins do this offseason, and a few other things, including, as I noted, the Joe Mauer email of the year. But first, a word from our friends, easy for me to say, at FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If for some reason your team is playing on Monday night because for some reason or another they have consecutive games or games playing at the same time. Not sure who thought that 2 games on Monday was a good idea, but not my job, not my prob. Anyway, if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The season is really, really ramping up. My Vikings are in position to at least make the NFC playoffs. We'll see what happens with the rest of the North. I always want to call them the NFC Central just because I'm old like that.
That was God's division.
Exactly. Black and blue division. The app is so easy to use, by the way, for FanDuel that there's a wide range of betting options. So you could use spreads, player props, overs, unders, pretty much anything you can imagine and much, much more. And again, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. So if your team wins, $150. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on and kick off the NFL season. That's locked on as your keyword on FanDuel.com. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. All right, Dave Brown, we are back. We're into the bullpen. We're into the shank of the evening, as it were, and lots to get to. What I want to ask you is this. If any other team was going to offer a contract like this, who do you think it would be? And like, how many teams off the top of your head do you think could actually stomach this level of risk? Because, it's money in the future, so it's less risky in that respect, and not that much money up front, so it's less risky in that respect. But, there's a lot of fans saying, well, my team wouldn't have been able to do this, which again ignores the fact that if he was getting $500 million, your team wasn't going to do that. $600 million, your team wasn't going to do that either. Is there a list of teams that you think could have actually done this and made it work?
Sure. I'm not sure how, there's some people out there that would tell you, well, any team could do it. I think the other side of that, though, is all the, would Ohtani want to go there? Would the risk for him is playing on a team like the Angels that just kind of meanders around. The Angels could afford to do it, something similar, but he's seen how the Angels work, and it's they had Trout and himself, and they couldn't break 500. So,
right.
It's kind of a tricky question here. Sort of getting at what you're getting at. I think. I'm a believer in real revenue sharing in Major League Baseball. I think there should be more of that. I think the mechanisms that they have at this point are inadequate, and I don't think that the problem is that Ohtani is getting all this money and only a few teams can afford it. It's that the teams aren't spending enough money, and there certainly are teams that have more revenue to spend than others. So I think it is an owner's problem that they've never really addressed. They've kind of half addressed it. And I think that's where, giving inducements for a competitive play and some actual real revenue sharing would help balance the situation out a little bit. But most of these guys that own the teams are really super duper wealthy people, and they can afford to spend more money than they do on the teams, and they come up with excuses not to. So I think that's really the crux of the problem, if there is one, with Otani. It's not that he's a problem. It's that the system that the owners have put in play is inadequate to make sure that everybody spends as much as they can and are able to compete.
With this Otani situation, and we've heard more as time has gone on as far as kind of the inner mechanisms of if the Dodgers thought they had a chance at him, and when he was on the hypothetical plane that he never took. What is your major gripe, or at which part of the whole thing is your biggest gripe? Because Bob Nightingale had a really good article in USA Today about how journalists have been used by agents for a long time. And this situation, I think, really sheds some unkind light on that.
Yeah.
When you look at this situation and you assess it, and granting, of course, that we still will probably learn more when the 30 for 30 comes out eventually. Where do you stand? Because there's people I respect and respect greatly saying, that maybe some of this wasn't necessarily on the up and up. At the end of the day, you're supposed to get your guy paid. Nez Bolello does a tremendous job of that. He represented a few Twins when I was covering a lot more than I have now in Phil Hughes and Trevor Plouffe. So I got to meet him, great at his job. Did you have any problems with like the ethics of if they had leaked the Dunedin meeting with the Blue Jays, or if they leaked that he was on the plane and JP Morosi ran with it? I feel like I'm kind of dancing around the point here. Where do you stand on this whole thing as ethics, from an ethics standpoint?
It is kind of hard to know what Shohei really wanted. I mean, he came out and said that he, didn't, from like a privacy standpoint, didn't want everybody up in his business over this. I mean, that's fine. But I don't know, like, you mentioned the agent, Nez. I mean, is it completely orchestrated on his part? And if so, you kind of tip your cap to him. So I don't have any like ethical problems from Otani's standpoint, like how he wanted apparently to handle these things, or even if he lied about it through his agent in order to get the best possible deal and throw people off the scent. It's up to us. It's up to me. It's up to the reporter, whomever it is, to be certain that what they're putting out there as fact is fact. And we kind of fumbled that this time, to borrow a metaphor from another sport. That's really the big thing. Not even that we were chasing the guy or with the airplane scenario, but it's that I think the reporter was fooled. I don't think it was on purpose that he stated a falsehood, or a lie, or whatever you want to call it. But I think that's where it's kind of a blow for sports journalism and journalism in general, that people aren't necessarily going to trust what they read. Now, I think a lot of people are already real cynical about it, and I think that's okay. I think it's to not necessarily trust. Don't believe everything you read. That's kind of an old saying anyway. I think that's sort of a safe way to be. But since it kind of blew up in spectacular fashion, that's really where the crux of the problem is with me. That it's kind of up to individuals, to remember their training, their Jedi training, and not blurt out absolutely everything that you're told. Don't believe what you read. That goes for journalists too. Giving when they give out news to the world, it's don't believe everything that you're told.
We read a story in second grade called Beware of Ballyhoo, and I'm surprised I still remember it at this point, but it was in our Houghton Mifflin textbook, and it talked about, I think our friend Jason,
another friend, boy,
Jason, Jason Collette, I think, actually works for Houghton Mifflin, believe it or not. But anyhow, it was in there, and it was just saying, don't believe everything you read. And kind of funny how prophetic that wound up being, considering the internet became mainstream a couple years later, and all of that. But it's a really, really good point to not believe everything you read.
I'm going to write a book called Beware of Ballet Sports. So it's a little different.
Wonder if you could get
all the
somebody
money managers at the top trying to make too much of a buck over content. It's not, with a bad app. Those are the elements of the story. So we'll see if anybody buys it.
Someone to write you a forward for it. That'd be cool. Speaking though of writing things, how about we talk about this email from our good friend Dave in Lakeville?
A real person?
Apparently. This was sent
going on 160.
Yep, this was sent to, I believe, the Baseball Writers Association of America. I don't know if it was the Minnesota chapter or the national chapter. It's unclear, but Dave from Lakeville, I won't give away his last name because someone with that name did some questionable stuff that we're not sure if it's him or not. So we'll just leave that out of it. You can find it if you want.
I know what you're talking about too.
Right.
But I'm not going to say because I'm responsible.
Good job. Yep. And he is also not, I don't think, on a plane to Toronto right now. I am 60 years old and a lifelong Twins fan. Joe Mauer is on the ballot this year, and I want each writer to know that he does not belong in the Hall of Fame. His 3 batting titles and MVP would make the average baseball fan think that he is a sure thing. However, my take is different. Joe Mauer was blessed by God with incredible baseball talent. However, the only time he showed it was when he needed a big year in order to sign a huge contract. What 2009 showed was that he had the talent to drive in runs and help his team win every year. But unfortunately for the Twins, that was the only year he did that. In 2010, he was back to hitting for average and again driving in minimal runs. Mineral runs would actually probably have been good. He made his $120 million. What more did he want? It was actually $184 million, editor's note. Sure, he hit for high average, but weak flares to left field will not win games. He was the last guy in the lineup that I wanted to see at bat in the clutch. A lot of people here in Minnesota believe injuries kept him and the Twins from winning. Buckle up, we're only halfway through here. The problem is that his injuries were made up. It was reported that he suffered from made-up injuries like bilateral leg weakness, whatever that is. The truth is that we've got a lot of emphasis on is here, that he was only after the dollar and didn't care whether the team won or lost. The Twins won exactly 0 playoff games during his entire career. You read that right. They never won a playoff game. Technically they did. He just didn't play in it. He was an above average catcher, which was half his career, and an average at best first baseman for the remainder of his career. Yes, 3 batting titles as a catcher does deserve recognition in the Hall of Fame. I don't think it was 3. I think it was 2. But he does not belong there. If feats get you a plaque, then Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders deserve to be enshrined. Don Larson, Johnny Vandermeer, Roger Maris, and Tommy Brown, who hit a home run in the major leagues at age 16, according to this guy, I can't verify that, belong there. Joe Mauer has similar stats to Bill Madlock, Al Oliver, Nomar Garcia-Parra, and Will Clark. I promise we're almost done. The difference between those players and Mauer are that those players really tried every year to help their team win. Our friend Dave definitely verified these facts. I'm sure that the Minnesota contingency of writers will all vote for him, but I'm hoping that the majority of you are not blinded by the capital mad, capital homer, capital love against all reason that has been shown to him forever. Hell, his jockstrap wasn't even out of the dryer in the clubhouse before the Twins retired his number. Vote no. Thank you for your time. This has been Dave from Blakeville writing 1 paragraph.
Yeah. Boomer.
Thoughts? Where do we go from here?
Well, speaking of bad journalism, there's a couple things in there about made up injuries, and that's the part. It's like, we know that Joe Mauer, I mean, I haven't seen the CT scans, but we know that he's had concussions. It's that would be a hard thing to fake. Somebody would, root that out. And if that was some sort of conspiracy, Joe Mauer did not. But let's get back to the journalism thing. I think that was heavily implied, that certainly maybe that he wasn't making it up, but that it wasn't serious enough for the time that he missed or the position change or truncating his career. I remember not a lot, but I remember several, high place columns written about Mauer during his career that were unkind and, kind of untrue too.
Yeah.
And assumed a lot of things, not in evidence, Your Honor. And I think that's where, that's where a lot of people get their nerve to say stuff like this. And, a lot of untruths in what Dave, this no relation to this Dave, has written about Mauer, misleading, immaterial things. He didn't try. It's like, how do you know let's just assume everybody's pretty much trying. And you certainly don't know that he wasn't. It's just, not, we're on the one hand, we're giving it a lot of attention, and I don't want to do that, but it is how, it's Hall of Fame season. Joe Mauer's up. People have these arguments. These are real, dumb arguments that people have, incorrect arguments. And the more we refute it, at least, we give people a chance to look things up themselves and decide for themselves. But this guy's full of crap.
As a Twins podcaster who covered Joe Mauer but doesn't live here and so hasn't been boiling in the Joe Mauer, bathing in the lukewarm Joe Mauer takes for the last, frankly, 20 plus years. What does that feel like to you? How does that come across to you? Because it's just mind numbing to me.
It's
a teenager when Joe was drafted.
People love the term self-hating. I think there's some self-hating going on. I think, he couldn't have been that good because he was a Twin, and the Twins are my team. And there's something going on there that the person doesn't think much of himself or Minnesota or the Twins seriously, it doesn't add up to reality. Mauer was probably a better hitter than he was a defensive player, but he was a very solid defensive player. Mm-hmm. And I looked this one up myself. He's got the third best OPS, not adjusted, but the third best OPS in history among people who were catching while they were hitting. What I mean is, in games in which Joe Mauer was the catcher, only Piazza and Mickey Cochran have a higher OPS. So, we're talking about a guy who is one of the best hitters as a catcher for anybody who's ever played. It didn't. His career was short, and if you want to take points off or say, well, he's not the third best catcher of all time. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah. But if you want to take some points off, that's fine. But the guy, on a scale of, are you in the Hall of Fame? Are you not in the Hall of Fame? He's in the scale somewhere. So it's not a ridiculous thing to say. It sounds like maybe they're just loud, but the hometown discount, so to speak, for Mauer of, that he's not as good as everybody wants. That seems to be as loud as, any homerism. He's talking about, he's worried about people thinking Mauer's going to be a Hall of Famer. It seems like most people, maybe they're just loud, but, they don't feel that the hometown guy is good enough for the Hall of Fame. It's fine to, disagree and stuff, but to make up points, it's just, it's really disappointing. And I think Dave from Water's Edge or wherever he is, he's had some head injuries too, because he's making some pretty damn bad arguments.
Yeah, no question about that. A couple of relievers landing in the AL Central. Will Smith for $5 million on a one-year deal with the Royals. Andrew Chafin for $4.25 million with incentives with the Tigers. Both guys who theoretically could help just about anybody, had their warts last year, as any non-elite middle reliever does. But that $4 to $5 million range probably is where the Twins would swim, I think, most likely, if they were to do a one-year deal.
Yeah.
Is it that at this point, the fact that they're waiting, maybe that they're not really willing to gamble on guys like that this early on when, like Will Smith had a 4.40 ERA last year, started out hot, really faltered down the stretch. A guy like Chafin, if he struggles, he can go from very, very useful to just another guy pretty easily, just based on handedness and all that.
Yeah.
Is that where the Twins should be swimming, free agent reliever wise, or what do you feel about that specifically?
Well, Will Smith has some miles on him that Chafin doesn't, and that seems like a solid move for the Tigers. Smith, I believe, has been on the World Series winner like 3 years in a row.
I think you're right.
Which is very odd. I don't think it's going to be 4 if he finishes the season with the Royals. I don't think the Royals are quite there in the rebuild yet that it's going to be another World Series.
Right.
He does seem to me like the kind of guy. Well, this should be like a February 1st deal, and maybe he just wanted to get it over with. I don't know. The Rangers had, as the season went on, lots of issues. I mean, he was really good in the first half, and a guy who was getting outs for a bullpen that otherwise wasn't.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the regular season, it seemed like they couldn't trust him. But relief pitchers are strange. They get it, and then they lose it, and they get it back, and nobody knows why. It's a big mystery. It's maybe not that much of a mystery to the pitching coaches, but it seems like a mystery on the outside. So there's guys like them available. Again, don't panic, folks, just because Chafin and Smith are off the board. But the Royals, I saw, I don't know if it was Bob. It might have been Bob, linking them to Marcus Stroman and Lucas Giolito and other people who would really help their, those are guys that are going to be costly, probably, but they're guys that maybe could help them.
Yeah, I actually had that set up here. Flaherty and Waka were a couple more names that came up with the Royals. It's tough for me because I look at it and I look at where they're at and I'm like, 9 years ago today, the Twins signed Irvin Santana. 9 years ago today, the Twins were in a position to not really need a guy like Irvin Santana, but no team needs Irvin Santana. But it's more a meaning of like, we're going to add some talent and all that. Marcus Stroman, none of those 4 guys really, unless you were to get Lucas Giolito back to 2021 or whatever was his best year with the White Sox. I don't have it off the top of my head. That player has value, but it would be very hard to get him to that percentile outcome. And it still probably wouldn't move the needle on your season that much. How do you balance that though? Because you want to see teams like that actively try to improve, but the brain in you that if you were the GM would say, I don't know if this is the right move right now.
Right.
Do you ever have that conflict appear?
Yeah, I do. As somebody who maybe as a student, if not a scholar, appreciates analytics. That's sort of where that nagging sensation comes in. All right, do we really need to sign Marcus Stroman to an $80 million contract over 4 years or whatever it's going to be?
Right.
But is there a better way to spend the money? Maybe, but is there a player that makes sense that will come to Minnesota at the same time? Kind of that whole Irvin Santana syndrome sort of thing. So yes, those things go through my mind, even though it's not my money to spend. So I understand what gives them pause, and that's why I'm still for the Twins going out and bringing Jordan Montgomery in. Because I think he would be better than all of them, and he would be more expensive. But they'd be, I think we'd know what we're getting. Last year, Stroman ended the season very poorly, and we don't know why. And you're right about Giolito. I think his results were not. I mean, his results in his last 2 teams were terrible. I think he was probably better than that with the White Sox. So he has less of a wilderness to come out of than Stroman. Stroman last year, his velocity was down at the end. His spin was down. Things were not as they were at the beginning of the season when he was looking like, he's making himself a lot of money in free agency, and he probably still will. Lots of questions though with him.
Well, parting shot, Red Sox announced minor league invites to spring training. Cam Boozer and Mark Contreras, a couple of former Twins on the list. My question to you is this. Do you think it's a weird time to send out those invites to spring with Christmas cards and everything going? I mean, I know you want to get them out early because I'm kidding. It always
Will it
makes
get
me
lost among the family photos? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and if if it doesn't show up in the mail, I don't know. I mean, mail's been
Does it happen?
Yeah, might be weird.
I don't know. I know you got to mail in your Hall of Fame ballot, and there's no other way to do it. So I hope that the Hall of Fame doesn't get a lot of other conflicting mail at this time, especially from weird fans talking about Joe Mauer, and so they lose ballots in the mail that way. I don't know, but it's a very real possibility. I'm kidding, of course. But
Okay, so I will not send the BBWAA a Christmas card this year.
Joe Mauer, I think he needs to pick me up.
Perfect. Well, hey, thanks so much, Dave. I think what we're going to do next with Locked On Twins is we're going to do kind of like report cards from the 40-man roster this last season as we wait for what appears to be just forever for the Twins to make a move. But in the meantime, we'll reminisce on what was a pretty great season. How does that sound, Dave?
I can't wait to do it.
Awesome. Well, we'll probably start as soon as tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out with us. This has been Locked On Twins. For Answer Dave Brown, I'm Brandon Warren signing off and saying we'll see you tomorrow night.